A slip of the tongue may mean the difference between victory and defeat.
With a quick mind and a ready smile. How to lose friends and infuriate people, all in one easy lesson.
Made possible only through years of research.
If you are to impress them, you must interest them.
Truth.
And soul.
Truth and Soul Incorporated, the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to be the truth?
So, welcome, Ross.
Thanks, Paul. Nice to be here.
You haven't listened to any of the previous podcasts, which I won't hold against you, but it's not terribly taxing.
Yep.
Just here to find out about your view on the way that the business is going, how you started out, and maybe some tips for those who might want to think about buying or selling an agency.
Yep.
So you went to school in Fielding.
Fielding Agricultural High School.
Where is Fielding?
It's kind of just off centre of the universe, really, but it's
right
a little bit out of Palmerston North.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So South North Island.
Yeah, it's a town of about 12, 13, 15,000.
Okay, so not normally what we'd think of as the hotbed for advertising folks. So how did you end up in the business?
I left school in my sixth form. I wanted to get out of Fielding, and there was no kind of university. Nobody in our family went to university in those days. So, but I wanted to get out of Fielding.
Yeah.
And initially, I applied to go into the New Zealand Navy Officers Cadet School.
Yeah.
Because I thought I saw a future on the Navy, and so I went over to Palmerston North for the final series of medical exams. And at the end of the day, they said, "You've passed. We're going to let you in, and we'll write to your mother." And then I got the bus home to Fielding, which was about a 20-minute ride.
Yeah.
And I got home, and she said, "How did you get on?" And I said, "Well, I got some good news and some bad news." "What's the good news?" "Well, they've accepted me." "What's the bad news?" "I don't want to go."
Yeah.
And that 20 minutes, I decided that wasn't for me. And I switched to advertising. Now, I'm never quite sure how I got from there to advertising.
Yeah.
But I did have a very, very inspirational art teacher at school. Really great, interesting guy, great potter.
Mm-hmm.
And
Curious name. Curious name.
Yeah.
Great Potter.
Yeah. And he was a very inspirational guy, and it was no coincidence that my best results ever were always in art.
Yeah.
Art history and painting and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So, and we're talking about 1970, I think it would have been. And I got on my bicycle and I rode down to the Fielding post office because I wanted to get the addresses of all the ad agencies in Wellington.
So you can't remember actually why you decided on advertising,
Other than I'd been interested in creativity and ideas.
That you were good at art at school and very little work was required.
Yeah.
So therefore,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay,
exactly.
Yeah. I've got you.
So I cycled down to the post office, asked for the yellow pages, because in those days, I mean, there was only one copy in town, really.
Yeah.
And I copied out every ad agency in Wellington and their address, wrote to them all, and then they all wrote back and I asked for an interview basically, and they all wrote back and said, "Yeah, come down."
On what basis did you say, "Hey"?
I just said, "Look, I'm fresh out of school. I'm interested in agencies, and I'd like to work in an agency. Can you give me a job?" And so I went down there for a couple of weeks, and I went and saw all these people. And after about the fourth one, they kept on offering me jobs. Literally. I mean, every time I went to one, they would say, "Look, well, there's a job here if you want it." Unlike today.
Why do you think that was? Because like today, you write to an agency and go, "Oh, I quite fancy working in advertising."
You won't get a response.
To get it.
Yeah. I think it was just a sign of the times. There were more jobs around. They probably liked the fact that somebody was coming to see them and actually taking the time to
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
or they just liked me. I don't know, but I did anyway. I after about 4, I thought, well, I should take one of these. So I just happened to take the last one I was at. I thought this is a pretty good idea.
And the last one was at?
A company called Kenyon Brandon Riggs, or KBR.
Yeah.
It's funny how every agency, they were never a great agency. They could have been, but they weren't. Every agency in the world who survives has always got 3 names.
Well, TBWA? Sorry, unfair, but...
Well, but they are TBW. They were 3 names. T and the B and the W. Weren't they?
TBWA, 4.
Yeah. Oh, 4,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, 3 or 4.
Oh, right. Okay,
Yeah. It always takes more than one person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there was no one was that arrogant apart from Mr. Gray.
Exactly.
Apparently, he's given up. But
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I got in, and I got in literally at the junior level. It was a good little agency, and I got in as a kind of like a trainee suit, even though I didn't have a trainee program. I was basically, the first few months, I was probably just the runner. I ran everywhere around town, dropping stuff at typography places, dropping stuff at studios, picking stuff up, all that kind of stuff, and just learning.
Yeah, I guess that's in London. The kind of the way in from nowhere was from the post room. I guess that was the
It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
it was the post room.
Yeah,
and I was pretty green coming from fielding. I was shared an office with my boss, who was, I think, the production manager, and I sat there for about 3 days, and I had a desk here, and he had a desk on the other side of the room, and there was a phone on the desk, and it never rang, and I kept on thinking, whose is that phone? Because I came out of, in fielding, we had a party line phone. Yeah. And this had dials on it as well.
So a party line was where like 3 or 4 houses shared it, was it?
No, about 5.
5 houses?
Yeah, shared the same line.
Yeah.
And you had a different ring, so you could tell by the ring who it was for.
So the phone was in, each house had a phone.
Yeah.
But when it rang, it could
They all rang.
Jeepers.
They all rang. But if you had a long, say, ring, that was your ring, you knew that you would pick it up.
Yeah.
Sometimes neighbours picked them up anyway and listened to each other's conversations. And we used to have a bit of fun as kids doing that.
Yeah.
But, I came from that kind of environment. I'm sitting there for 3 days looking at this phone. And I finally said to this guy, his name was Vic, what's this phone for? He said, well, it's yours. And I was staggered by the fact that I had my own phone.
Mm.
But this is, we're now talking...
Without anyone to call.
Without anybody to call, So that was just a sign of the times. It was just the way the business was then.
Yeah.
And so I spent a couple of years there.
And Wellington at that time was the
great place
where most
to be.
New Zealand advertising happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the head offices all the agency head offices were in Wellington.
Yeah.
Largely. All the big corporates of head offices were down here.
Yeah.
Down in Wellington.
Yeah.
And Auckland was, even though it was 4 times the size, it was always viewed as a kind of separate,
lesser
place. Strange that.
Okay, so you got on, presumably.
I was there for a couple of years, and I learned quite a few things. And then one day I picked up the Dominion newspaper. And in those days, the Dominion newspaper on the front page was all classified advertising. So there were no display ads on there.
Yeah.
But there was this morning, it was a quarter page in the bottom right-hand corner. It was from Ogilvy and Mather, and the headline read 9 brilliant ad men and women wanted. And I thought, shit, that sounds like me.
Why not?
A bit above my station, but I thought, so...
So the thought of, as we kind of alluded to before, the thought of agencies actually hiring people off the street that just wandered in and went, oh yeah, you'll do.
Yeah. And
the idea of an agency advertising to hire 9 brilliant people today.
I was astounded by the fact that it was a display ad on the front page of a paper that always had classified advertising. So they would have paid a premium for it.
Or they'd have got it free because of their...
Possibly. And the fact that the way they couched the thing. couch the message.
Yeah.
And I thought, shit, that's clever. So anyway, I applied, and I got the job, and
it's also it's a good way of Ogilvy and Mather advertising for clients, because you're taking a big spot in the front of the paper.
Right. That's right.
You're going, we're growing.
Yeah.
Pay attention. This is our name. We're
right.
important. We go on the front of the paper, and we want brilliant people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. And the day I walked in for the interview, again in those days, I keep on saying those days, but then, this was about 73, 74, I think it was, they were on the top floor of the World Trade Center building in Wellington. Because we had one too, but we had no planes coming to it, obviously.
Yeah, no relation. Yeah.
No relation. And the lift doors opened, and there was shag pile carpet, this colour, this deep red colour, bright red colour.
Yeah.
And
Ogilvy red. Yeah.
Ogilvy red. All the walls were white, and all the furniture was black. And the carpet was that kind of like that deep. And
Ross is indicating 1 inch.
Yeah.
People. Yeah.
And there were two incredible looking women on the front desk.
Yeah.
And I thought, I could live this. This is,
you know. It was the carpet that most attracted you.
The carpet, definitely. And we had, I was there for probably 2 or 3 years, and we had a fantastic time, and I learned a hell of a lot. I shared an office with Cullinane, Peter and I can't remember the third guy. There were 3 of us in an office.
Okay, so this is Peter Cullinane, who went on to be a big part of Saatchi Wellington globally, and is now, amongst other things,
Lewis Road
Creamery.
Yeah, we just sold it.
Just sold?
Yeah.
Okay. Who to?
The guy that owned half of it. I don't know who. A big farming company in South Island.
Yeah.
He did. I saw that in the paper about a month ago.
Yeah.
So we had, it was just an amazing agency to be in, because they were one of the early multinationals into Wellington. They were a serious competitor to Calenza at the time, who were the most creative agency in town.
And Calenza were based in Wellington?
In Wellington, I think their head office was in Wellington, in Wells Street. And it was a fantastic 2 or 3 years.
Everybody always says to me that, you should have been around advertising in the 80s, which I wasn't, because I'm too young. But how did the 70s differ to the 80s? It was...
Well, there was a lot more attention given to training.
Yeah.
And I can only talk about my experience with Ogilvy as an example of that. But at Ogilvy, we had one of the senior account directors was a guy called Don Ryder. And he trained people like Peter and myself. He trained all the young suits on how to write briefs and how to do a lot of stuff and how to think about strategy. And he was a very, very good suit. Quite an old school suit, but a really, really inspiring guy.
I think I'm right in saying that at the time, O&M were the... I can't think of an equivalent now, but they were one of the leading multinationals.
Absolutely.
And they went out from the States because before O&M came along, really multinationals didn't exist.
No, the only one in town was McCann Erickson, really.
Yeah, you just had local agencies,
big local agencies.
Because I came across at some stage in my career the Ogilvy and Mather book about how to run an agency.
Yeah,
which you probably seen at some stage.
Yeah.
It probably hasn't changed, but it's quite a useful. Tone.
It seemed like about every quarter, a parcel would arrive. It would go out to every office in the world, and it would be a magic lantern, which is like a 36mm slide projector carousel. And it was a how-to presentation, supposedly from David Ogilvy. I mean, who knows? But so the agency would gather in the boardroom, and then we'd go through this presentation on how to write headlines, how to create advertising that sells, how to do this, how to do that. And when you're in your 20s, early 20s, you kind of suck that stuff up.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that going on as well, a lot of training, and we had there was a guy. The CEO was a guy called Rennie Cunnick who was sent out from London to open the office with a guy called Mike Buckler. Mike was chairman and Rennie was CEO, I think. And Rennie was truly an inspirational leader, and so people like Peter and I and a few others there, we had very good tutors on the ground teaching, basically.
It sounds like, because Ogre and Mather were the not the gold standard or the of global multinational agencies. Others have come along since then and been better, but the groundwork and the training, and it seems like you really lucked out by landing in that.
We did. Yeah. So I was there for 2 or 3 years, and then I went across to, I followed my girlfriend or not at the time, but I got a job with, I transferred to Melbourne office for a year.
How was that?
It wasn't as exciting as being in Wellington. I think because it was bigger.
That Melbourne?
Yeah. In Melbourne, yeah. It was very, Melbourne.
I was shouting out to the Melbourneites. So
It was down St Kilda Road, and they had the same kind of office feel to it in terms of the red and the black and the white, red, black and white, but it didn't have the same, wasn't the same level of fun and the same level of intensity as it was in Wellington. And by that stage, they'd opened an office in Auckland as well, and Auckland was going pretty well, and that was a similar kind of operation to Wellington. But it was just a fabulous environment to be in, and I was very lucky to be there, I thought. But we worked bloody hard. I'd get there in the morning. Cullen had already been there. He was already in there a couple of hours earlier, probably. You worked hard, but you played hard as well. We, not sure we lunched a lot, but we used to drink a lot after work. In terms of going out and having fun, I mean.
Yeah.
But we worked very, very hard. And it was we had some great... main client I worked on in those days at Ogilvy was Philips Colour Television.
Yeah.
K9. It was a launch of colour TV in New Zealand, and the agency had decided to go and do some research, which I don't think too many people did in those days in New Zealand.
No.
To find out what people expected to see.
Well, seeing as most research is done by telephone and had party lines, that was going to be...
Yeah, so they hired Halen Research, which was a leading research company in New Zealand at the time, and to understand what people wanted out of a colour TV set, even though people hadn't seen colour TV yet.
Yeah.
But they knew it was coming. Surprisingly, they said colour. And so we went out on this line that it's colour so natural, it's almost like being there. Every other TV brand, colour TV brand, and there were a lot of them launched at the same time, they all went out on technology. And K9, the Philips K9 swamped the market, cleaned up.
Well, Philips then and still do make pretty good products. Yeah, I can remember my father used to work in advertising, and he announced we were getting a colour TV. Yeah, and I think he made more fuss about it than we did, because as a kid you're like, that would be great, and you get colour TV, and you just accept it.
That's right.
Now we have colour, and life goes on.
But again, that I'm young. I'm working with these people and I'd never heard of research before, never heard of market research before, and they believed in what they were doing, and they sold it well, and they got the client on side. And one of my jobs was to go around the country, making all these dealer presentations. I was just part of a team that were doing it. I wasn't doing it, but it was just a fabulous learning experience, and it was just brilliant.
So you spent a year in Melbourne.
Yep.
And you did Philips back in New Zealand.
Yep.
So at what stage, you were working your way up the ladder, at what stage do you think, I think I'll go and do this on my own?
I'd always kind of thought about it, but it hadn't really kind of clicked in properly until I then came back from Wellington. I came back from Melbourne to Wellington.
Yeah.
Because my girlfriend, who was soon to be my wife, decided that she wanted to be back in Wellington. And I'd had some issues around health, so I came back and I joined ILOT Advertising. Does that name ring a bell?
No, I don't know.
ILOT at the time was the biggest agency in the country, privately owned.
Mm.
They actually funded George Patterson's into business in Australia, in part.
So ILOTs came before George Patterson?
Well, I don't know if George Patterson's were in Australia at the time or... But anyway, I know that ILOTs actually helped them get into business in Australia, George Patterson himself.
Right, okay. Just a bit of background for listeners, because George Patterson, to anyone who's spent time in Australia, is a big and famous name of an agency. I worked there for a while because they became George Pat's Y&R, and do they still exist?
No.
Yeah, I mean, they were kind of like a Colenso. If you imagine in New Zealand, Colenso not existing anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
George Pat's disappearing is a bit.
That's right.
It's a bit like that.
In New Zealand, it was ILOTs.
Yeah,
they've been around for a long time. They'd started in the 40s, I think, 30s or 40s. They even had a London office for a little while.
Wow.
This is back in probably the 50s.
Yeah.
And they were a really big agency in Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch and Dunedin, every place in the country. So I joined them, and I was there twice over about 8 or 9 years, I think, from memory. And I got to account director level, and then I became a shareholder and a director of the company. And I was pretty young, but I was working very hard, very, very hard. And a client came in to see me one day, and I knew I wasn't well, but I couldn't figure it out. And a client came in to see me one day, and we had this meeting, and then he left, and then he phoned me up as soon as he got back to the office, and he said to me, "Ross, are you okay?" And I said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "You don't look very well." And I said, "Well, it's funny you should say. I don't think I do feel very well now I think about it." So I went and saw my doctor, my GP, and I walked in, and he said to me, "Hello, how you doing?" He's like, very happy chap. He said, "What can I help you with?" And I burst into tears. And he waited for me for about 15 minutes. He waited for me to calm down. And what had happened was that ILOTs at the time, although it was very big and all my clients were doing very well, the agency was losing a lot of business. And I think I was taking that on. It lost Air New Zealand, and then it lost Shell, and then it had all these huge brands.
And you were a shareholder?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a tiny wee shareholder. But I think I was taking it on board myself, and it got to me. And so, you know what advertising is like, and it can put incredible pressure on you.
Absolutely. Like when I was saying that, I'm not now kind of more or less retired, and the release of pressure, and for listeners who are still working in it, I think if you can't handle the pressure, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah,
but it is there. I had it every single day.
Yeah.
It was like, what problems have I got?
I know. So I'm dealing with this pressure, and anyway, this doctor saw me, and once I stopped, the tears.
Yeah.
He said to me, he looked at me, he said, "Ross," he said, "I'm seeing about one guy in your position a week, and it's you don't realise that you're heading for a fall, big fall, if you don't start making a few changes." And he said, "I think first thing you should do is take a break, take an extended break." I said, "How long?" He said, well, as long as you possibly can. I said, "Well, I'll take a holiday for a couple of weeks." "I'm thinking longer than that, Ross." And he said, well, I can't. I'm too busy. I can't. And he said, well, anyway, to cut a long story short, he made me go from his surgery to home and not go to the office that day. And he phoned my boss. He said, look, I'll phone them. I'll take care of them.
Yeah.
You just go home and I want you to take 3 months off. Literally. He said, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. So he phoned the agency and said to my boss, look, I'm not well and need some time off. And they were very good about it. And so I sat at home, and I think our youngest child had just been born. Yeah, he had, because I spent most of my time walking the pram around the block trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. And then I began to realise all the pressures that I was taking on board myself that weren't mine, but I was trying to take them on board because of the pressure that we live under in advertising. And I decided that, first of all, I'd get out of advertising. I genuinely sat there for a while thinking, now what else can I do? And I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to do. And just fortuitously, a friend of mine, an English guy, phoned me one day, and he was the treasurer at a bank. And he said, Ross, look, I want to launch this new product, a new investment product. And can you do it for me? And I said, but you've got an agency.
Yeah.
He said, they're no good. I want to get rid of them and I want you to do it. And I said, well, look, Andrew, you know I can't because I'm taking some time off. This is about 6 months after the event by this stage, I think, from memory. And
so you were back at work at that
No.
time?
I was still at home.
Yeah.
I said, I can't. And he said, well, I really want you to. I need someone I can trust. And I said, but I haven't got any, I'm not an agency, I'm just by myself. And he said to me, well, Ross, that's your problem, but I need you to help me. And so I rang up a couple of guys who I only vaguely knew, a writer, an art director. Sorry, one writer who I'd worked with at Ogilvy, and we started an agency on the back of that client. And that's how I got to it. It was kind of by accident, but I knew I wanted to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing it. I think that's a really important story. I think issues with mental health in all industries
absolutely.
Are going on,
Yeah.
and I think in advertising particularly. So again, to folks out there, this is not a new thing.
No,
Perhaps to the best of us, and don't think you're on your own.
Yeah. And I've had the same situation where I've seen people about to fall off the deep end. And I've said to them, listen, you need to get away from this for a while. We'll help you get away from it. Because you can't, if you take on everything and you take on board everything that you're working in and around and whatever, it's not very good for your health. So, and I became a stronger person for doing that. So that's kind of how I got into.
Yeah. So there were three of you.
Yep.
Plus, working in Wellington.
Yeah.
And you built the agency up.
Yep.
And at what point did the Clemenger Group come knocking and go, or maybe we could be a part of this?
Funny things happen in our agencies, as you know, Paul. It's a really interesting thing happened. And one day, this was in the share market crash, 87.
Yep.
And we got a call from Chase Corporation, and they wanted an agency to launch a huge new property development down in Courtenay Place. And we got the business. And as you want to do, and I learned a lesson here, I sent out a press release to the media saying that we'd just been appointed by Chase Corporation to handle this big thing. And then it got into NBR or Ad Media or somewhere, I can't remember where, and the client told me, oh no, we're still using HKM in Auckland. Because I thought that it was just us.
Oh right. So you went to the press and said, right, we've got this business.
Yeah.
And the client goes, well, hang on, you got some of it.
You got it in Wellington, but in Auckland we're still using HKM. So I got on the phone straight away, and I thought, sure, I've caused a bit of a problem here. And I rang. I got hold of Mike Hutchison, and he said he thought it was a great joke. He said, look, don't worry about it. And
Mike was running HKM.
HKM, he was the H. Hutchison, Knowles and Marinkovic, he was the H. And Hutch said to me, throwaway line, and we're often in Wellington because they had the Honda business. He said, next time we're in Wellington, I'll give you a call and we'll have a chat. Never gave it another thought until there was a knock on the door, literally a knock on the door one day. We were renting a big house in Thornton, that was our agency. And it was Hutch and Mike Knowles and Marko Marinkovic on the front door. And they said, look, we're in town and we've finished a meeting early. We thought we'd come and see you. And they spent the afternoon with us, and we got on like a house on fire, particularly Hutch and I. And one thing led to another, and they ended up buying us. Or Clemenger ended up buying us because they owned most of HKM.
Right.
So we became HKM in Wellington. And that was a lot of fun with Hutch. Then I got a call, and then I was on the board of.
And that worked out well financially, presumably.
It wasn't a great coup because we'd only been going about 18 months, so we didn't have a lot to sell.
Yeah,
good for them.
Yeah,
but this is where a little bit of naivety was kicking in, obviously.
Yeah,
but we sold, and we became part of a bigger agency, and then part of the Clemenger Group, and I was briefly on the board of Clemenger, and hated it. Hated being in the same room as Hilton Mackley. Then one Sunday morning, Hutch phoned me and said, look, can you get on a plane and come to Auckland tonight? Because we're having dinner with the Rialto guys.
Those cinema guys?
No, Rialto Advertising.
Oh, I didn't.
Who were also a Clemenger agency.
Right.
And they were, up until that point, or shortly before, they were a very hot agency in Auckland only. But they were floundering, and Hilton decided that he had put HKM and Rialto together.
Yeah.
And it was just this terrible. We went to this dinner where Marko pissed on everybody else at Rialto because he thought they were a bunch of crackpots and didn't respect them, and it was just terrible. And then we got told off by Hilton the next day for treating family members like the enemy. And anyway, they forced us into this merger, which none of us wanted to do. But by that stage, they owned the business, so we had to do it. And we became HKM Rialto for a while. So I ran HKM Rialto in Wellington along with Kim Wigstead. So we had 2 MDs, 2 creative directors, 2 media directors. It was just a shambles.
Yeah.
And I decided that I preferred it being in charge of my own destiny. And we were pitching
because you were owned by someone else, or because there were 2 of you in?
No, because we were owned by somebody else. Yeah. In selling, we lost control over what we were doing, and so after about 9 months, HKM and Wellington were pitching for the Postbank business, or ANZ, who owned Postbank. And I was asked to help them on the pitch, and we had Rural Bank as a client in Wellington. And I knew that if we won the business, they would have to let go Rural Bank as a client. So as soon as HKM won the other bank, I then went to the Rural Bank CEO and said, look, this is happening, and I'm not happy, and I want to carry on with you as a client, but I want to start again.
Yeah.
And they said, go for it. So I did. And that's how we...
And that was okay contractually with the...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, because they had to let go the Rural Bank anyway.
Yeah.
Because
No, I went about your restraint of trade if you... But they probably had 2 CEOs, they were probably glad to get rid of one.
Well, Kim, by that stage, he'd gone too because he was fed up.
Yeah.
I think in those days, I don't think there were restraints of trade.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure there weren't, actually. Anyway, so I started again and with a couple of other people, and that's how we started Goldsack Harris Thompson. And then we started with the Royal Bank, and then we grew that very quickly over about 7 or 8 years. And we did very well out of it, and had a lot of fun and good times. We only had one bad year, and even then we made money. We only had one really, borderline year, but it was a great time. And as we became more successful, agencies, multinationals kept on knocking on the door.
Because at the time, if I'm right, so the multinationals, generally all based in the US, wanted to serve US companies all over the globe, and hey, that includes New Zealand.
Yeah,
and so the bigger companies will go, shit, we haven't got an office in New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's about time we got one.
Yeah,
let's have a look about.
Yep. So, and we kept on saying to them, we're not interested. Thank you, but we're not interested. We got as far as doing due diligence on buying Ogilvy in Wellington, ironically.
You were going to do a reverse takeover?
Yeah. They approached us. The CEO approached us. It was mad. I mean, he was in the process of going to Clemenges, but he said, look, we want to do something with you, or you may want to buy the office, the operation in Wellington. So we did due diligence on them, but it was just a mess. So we steered away from it. And then Y&A came along, and we said, look, we're only interested in talking with you. We don't want to give up control, so we want at least 50% of the action. And they said, we're happy with that. And so we ended up putting our operation together with theirs through a quite a complicated relationship. But we became one company on the face of it. And we ended up with a couple of guys at Y&R in Auckland. We ended up owning 60% of it.
So who contacted you? Was it in Australia or in New York?
No, I was here in
Y&R in New Zealand.
Yeah, it was the chairman. There was the independent chairman of the agency,
right,
who initially contacted me, and then he came down with the CEO, and so we had a meeting. And by this stage, I'd kept on saying to my partners that at some stage, you guys, we're going to have to say yes to one of these people, because we're heavily dependent on one client. And as fast as we grow other clients, this client is growing faster than they are. And, clients change, as we know. We'd had this client for a good number of years, or the bank. And one day there'll be a change, and I don't want to be on my own when there's a change.
Yeah.
So I think we should say to one, in the next year or so, we should say yes to one of these people.
As a security blanket.
Security blanket. Yeah. And one of the partners wanted to get out as well. So Y&A came along and they said, look, we're interested, we want to do something with you, and we're quite happy to leave control in New Zealand. So we ended up owning 60%, and I owned 30% of it in my own right. So, and because of the way I had a very good lawyer, the way we worded the sale and purchase agreement and the contracts were that even at 30%, they had to come to me before they wanted to do anything.
Right. And
so we had a degree of control that's beyond what you'd normally get in that situation.
So I listened to that. People who are maybe thinking about selling an agency that lawyers are expensive but useful.
At the time, the bill from the lawyer and the accountant over a year, because it took a year to negotiate, because we were dealing with Auckland, Sydney and New York, and there are lawyers in every city. So it cost us $100,000 to do the deal. This is in 1990, 91, 92, I think it was. I can't remember. Anyway,
Early 90s.
early 90s. And
Just as I was starting out in London.
yeah, it was a lot of...
Why not?
yeah, it was a lot of money, and but it was the right thing to do. And then a couple of years later, no, it would have been 99. It was 99, sorry.
89.
No, 99.
99.
Yeah,
Okay,
99,
right.
yep. We did the deal, and then Y&R in Auckland started falling over. And so at the same time as my marriage fell over, so by the end of 2001, I decided to relocate up to here to get away from the crap down there and to fix the problem up here. And so that's when I came to Auckland to run the whole thing from Auckland. Yeah.
In Parnell.
In Parnell, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I've been lucky that we've had lots of good times. I mean, we had, had some tough times as well, but advertising has been good for me. Good to me as well, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've enjoyed it? Mainly.
Loved it.
Mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just had lots of fun, worked very hard. As you know, you work with some really interesting people. Really, really interesting. You don't get the kind of...
And John Ramage.
And John Ramage, yeah. You don't, the kind of people who you don't, if you're sitting in a corporate, you don't get to work with. And you get to work with some really good clients. I mean, some very average clients as well, but, but...
Yeah, it's true that it's... there's some great things and there's some bad things, but it's not generally boring.
It's never boring.
Yeah.
Never boring. Jesus Christ, I could... at Goldsack Harris, I had a partner who was drinking too much and not coming in until lunchtime and then going out for 2 hours and not coming back in the afternoon. And so these are things you had to deal with. There was always something going on. There were parties going on all night in the office. There were just... But we were working hard.
And it was, it
was a lot of fun.
Before Me Too.
And before Me Too, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so they were at who's your creative director in the early 2000s, 99? Was it Gordon Clark?
Yeah, he left. He was a casualty of a restructuring. Then Chrissy LaHood.
Yeah, but she was based
in Wellington, but she came up a lot.
Yeah,
and to help me out, and she was great to work with. And then Y&R, who at that stage done a deal with George Patterson's.
Yeah,
and
under Hamish McLennan.
Hamish McLennan.
Yeah,
yeah. And I was working quite closely with Hamish because he came into Y&R New Zealand, Y&R Australia at the same time that I came into Y&R Auckland.
Yeah.
And they decided they'd buy, that's right, they did a deal to buy George Patterson's, which included their agency in Auckland.
Bates?
No, maybe, was it Generator?
Yes.
Generator.
I think, yes.
Yeah. So we ended up effectively buying Generator at the same time and taking that into the business. With Generator came Tony Bradburn.
Yeah.
And this is about the time that I'd hired John, and I said, look,
John Ramage from Colenso.
John Ramage from Colenso. I said to John, I'm hiring you now because I'm out of this business in 3 years' time, but I want a managed process. I want to manage my way out of this so that when I go, the clients don't kind of notice, and I just disappear and you'll become CEO. And I wanted we'd at the same time we'd joined, or we'd got Generator in, and I wanted Tony to be CD. Because I knew that I just kind of got a feeling he was a very clever guy. And in the end, I'd already said to John, look, from now you make the decisions, because I want you to start running this as if you're on your own now. And he decided an alternative option. As it turns out, we would have been better to have hired Tony. Whether he would have stayed with us, I don't know, but he was a talent, a rare talent, and a really good guy. And look what he's got on to do. Incredible.
Yeah. That special now, very successful. Just opened an American office.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, and successfully going in Sydney. a couple of things that, you know, in your business career, and this happened to me a couple of times. That was one of them. Another time, this is beyond advertising, when I was out when I owned another business, when I knew intuitively that hiring a guy putting a guy in place to run the business was the wrong thing to do, but I let myself be talked into it, and it rebounded on me badly. And so going with your gut feel on some people is a good thing to do. Follow what your gut is telling you about when you're hiring people. Not all the time, but
yeah, well, that's the thing. Go with your gut instinct, but not all the time.
Yeah, your gut instinct. I mean, you have to rely on a lot of factual information, obviously, but when push comes to shove, what can turn it is your gut instinct about a person, in my experience. And when I've gone against my gut instinct, I've been wrong. But these are things you learn, obviously.
So you and you oversaw. You were kind of like in the background figure of Y&R as it went through a bit of turmoil.
No. But I was in the background, but that's like we were growing really well.
Yeah.
We'd won a lot of business. This was with John there.
Yeah.
We'd won a lot of business, including the Bank in New Zealand and Burger King.
Yeah.
So we were doing really well, and so and then I left. Then I retired, basically. Well, I didn't retire, but then I stopped.
I think I went to your retirement party.
Yeah. And so
first one. Yeah.
And then I went over to England to live for a couple of years.
Cardiff, weren't you in Cardiff?
Oh, just north of Cardiff.
Yeah.
Sorry, on the other side of Cardiff.
Yeah.
I about a year before part of this plan of getting out of advertising, well, I got into another business, and completely unrelated to advertising. It was a company supplying medical kits to super yachts here in Auckland. And about a year before I left Y&R, sold out completely, I'd put some money into this business. And so I became the biggest shareholder. And when I finally came to leave Y&R, I'd already made up my mind to go to England to rescue this business, because we'd shifted a couple of people to Mallorca, and we'd started a business in Wales to service the European market for super yachts. And I decided that I need to be there to fix it, because there was a lot of my money in there, and it was actually going out the back door, and I couldn't afford to lose this kind of money. So I got on, and I was single, and I got on the plane, and away I went.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things you learn in advertising that you can apply to other businesses, I've found as well. Because I remember I arrived in Wales in November 2008 or 9. It was the year of the share market crash, year of the GFC.
So yeah, November 2008.
Yeah.
Cardiff, November 2008. Not the best place to be, I imagine.
Dark.
Yeah.
Dark. And the business couldn't even afford me to be there. So I wasn't earning a salary for a while. I had to pay my own way to get there, because I was so worried about the cash flow. And I remember I was living in this. I rented an apartment somewhere in Cardiff. I don't know where it was. Dark as hell, and not what I was used to. Trying to work out what the hell I was going to do with this business. I phoned our sales manager in Mallorca. He was one of the two founders of the business, and he was an ex-SAS medic. He and his business partner, they were both medics in the SAS, New Zealand SAS. So they knew everything about medicine in remote places, and medicine on a boat, on a super yacht, because they were always in remote places. Yeah. Things happen. So they designed these really great products, really great approach to the business, which is what hooked me into it, was the product. It was so good. And I got there, and I was faced with all this money running out of the business, and sales being about a third of what they should have been to break even, and having to report another monthly loss to my other shareholders in Australia. So one day I got the guy from Mallorca, the sales guy, to come over to Heathrow Airport, and I got one of the guys to come over from Cardiff. And I hired a room for the day, and we met for a day. And I said, look, I want to know how this business works. I want to know how where does the process start when somebody decides they want to spend £5,000 on euros on a medical kit for their super yacht, or 5 of them?
Yeah.
How does it start? It took me about 2 hours to get them to actually start answering the question, where does the process start? Because one of the things you learn in advertising is that you need to understand where the customer journey is.
Yeah.
And where the communication inputs are and all that kind of stuff. And finally they clicked, and so we mapped the process to help me understand how the whole thing worked. I was green as hell. Didn't know anything really. So anyway, through that day, it taught us, we suddenly realised that we were adopting the wrong sales strategy. We had this guy, we based him in Mallorca so that he could go and knock on the hulls of super yachts, took himself on board the boat with a fancy kit and try and make a conquest sale. And we worked out that the best thing we could do was actually talk to where the ships are being built while they're being built, because it takes about 2 years to build a ship.
Yeah.
And after they've designed it, the first person they employ is a skipper, even though the boat's 2 or 3 years out of the water, to oversee the build and to oversee the fit out. That's the time that you talk to these guys. And had I not used that kind of thing that we always did in advertising to understand the journey, had I not done that, I don't think we would have changed the strategy, and I don't think we would have survived.
I personally think that the business lessons that you learn in advertising, because you're in and out of so many different companies.
That's right.
And you almost your muscle memory is like, what are you trying to do? How are you trying to achieve it? And often, particularly with small businesses, whoever's running. Oh.
I thought I heard something.
Oh, man gets that way in the mountains. Hear a lot of things ain't really there.
No. It sounded like horses.
Whoever's running doesn't. Yeah. They just don't think that way. They think, I've got a great product, make it. There it is. Everyone buy it.
Yeah.
And
why aren't they buying it?
Yeah.
And so we did that. And we changed the strategy completely, the sales strategy. And we said to the sales guy, you need to go and find out where where the shipyards are. He said, yeah, they're all in places like Romania and Germany and Yugoslavia and all over Italy. So we'll go and see them. And over the next 2 years, we grew the revenue line by 7-fold. Just because we had such a great product, and I knew it was a good product, and we applied the right kind of principles to get to the right answer. And that's why advertising is such a great business to be in.
Yes.
Because as you say, 1 hour you're working on a bank, and then you're working on a burger, and then you're working on a farming operation, and then you're doing toothpaste, and you learn some. I once went to work in New York. Well, I thought I was going to work in New York. I didn't do it. I got there and I hated it so much I came home. But I was going to be an account manager on one type of toothpaste for one Colgate brand. And that was going to be my life. And I'm thinking, do I want to do this?
How long were you in New York before you decided that?
5 days.
5 days, yeah.
Literally.
And you went, yeah.
And a mate of mine, they said to me, I said to my boss in New Zealand, can you get me to London? So he tried. He said, there are no jobs, but there's an opening in New York. Do you want that? I said, yes. He said, you have to get over to Sydney this week to meet the account director who happens to be in Sydney on the Colgate thing. And so I get across to Sydney and I met this guy and he said, yep. I came home and only then told my wife. Mm. She said, look, I don't want to fucking go to New York. And I said, look, I'll go ahead and then I'll find a place to live and I'll get settled, and then you and George, our only child at that point, can come across.
Yeah.
And I'm stuck in this hotel room in Times Square, just off Times Square, wondering what the fuck I've done.
That's quite like the Navy. You just yeah. But no. Now, I've got some questions for you. What most important piece of advice could you give to young people who want to get into the business now?
I think if you can get into an interview situation I think you've got to be able to take no for an answer, and you've got to keep on going until somebody says yes, because it is a wonderful business to be in. I think today, going what I've gone through now, to what's happening today, I'd be looking for a different type of business to be in the agency world. Heavily digitally focused and big into technology and data and all that kind of stuff. But I think you've got to back yourself. You've got to talk to as many people as you can. And when one door closes, there'll be another door opening somewhere, and you've got to keep on going until you get what you want.
Persistent. How do you think? What is the biggest change that you've seen over your years in the industry? Now, obviously, digital, but I don't know if
I think
go beyond that.
I think. Well, I mean, there's a lot of those things that change, obviously, that technology has brought on us, but the fundamentals don't change.
Yes.
The way you deliver messages and the way you approach some things change, but fundamentally everything is just the same, I think. But I don't think people are trained as much as they used to be.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think people get trained at university learning stuff.
Yeah.
But when they come into the agency, it's kind of like they're left there to get on with the job.
Yes.
And you can't do that. I mean,
it's on-job training.
On-the-job training is critical.
Yeah, I remember working at Y&R in 1990.
It was in London.
In London, yeah. When I started, the suits would come in and they would work. You'd take 3-5 suits every year.
Yeah.
And they'd spend some time in production. They'd spend some time in creative.
That's right.
And they go on. Yeah. And there was although in London nobody joined an agency having done tertiary education in advertising.
No, they didn't.
They'd done geology or art history or something. There was no that didn't exist.
Yeah, the wonderful thing about an advertising, I think, and it's still the case, you generally get people who are very inquisitive. They've got inquiring minds, and they want to know things. They want to know why. And conversely, when you're hiring people in advertising, I always found that often I'd say, look, I've got your CV. It look. I mean, I know you can do the job, but then I'd say things like, what are you reading right now? To try and get an understanding of what their minds were like and what they were thinking about, and how they were approaching things, and how inquisitive they are.
People they learn how to write CVs, and they learn by rote and things that they think their employers want to hear.
Yeah.
And anybody or most people can sit in an interview for half an hour and put across what they think the employer wants, but it's what you want to find out as the interviewer is what do they really like when you take that to one side, and that I think is always a tricky thing to do.
Yeah. So it's like saying to somebody, when you're going into a young person, when you're going into an interview, by all means tell them about what you've learned and what courses you've done and what degrees you've got and whatever. But get that stuff out of the way pretty quickly, and then tell them about you. Tell them about
if what there is about you is worth sharing.
Well, but if it's not, then the interview is going to be very short, which can be a blessing.
Yeah.
But if they really want to if they want to get in the front door, then talk about yourself, not in terms of but in terms of how you think and what you're interested in, and what books have you read, what films had made you really energized, or who do you really admire politically? Who do you admire as a writer? Find out those things. Talk about those things that, and then you're sharing something about you. It's not just what's on a bit of paper and what it says on a degree, because the people who are hiring you in advertising, they are generally looking for people who have got inquiring minds. They've got to be able to do the job, and they've got to be able to do the job when it's needed and meet deadlines, but most of all, they want people who can think, who can say, why is that happening?
So we talked a lot about the business and the account management side of advertising.
Yeah.
If I could turn just to the creative for a bit, what's the work that over your career that you've been involved in that you've most been proud of?
I think the stuff that we did, the stuff that I thought the best I've been involved with was probably a lot of the early TUI work, TUI beer work.
Yeah.
Which came out of Wellington. This was before we were Y&R days.
Yeah.
That's some of the stuff that I was most proud of. But this was another lesson to me too. At the time, we were working with a very, very good client, a client who pushed us, really, really pushed us. No, not in a threatening way, but pushed us to do great work, to do better work. And she was the marketing director, and she had a lot of the DB brands under her control, and she'd given us the TUI, we'd won the TUI pitch, but she really pushed us and nurtured us to do. And those clients are really, they're pretty hard to find.
Yes,
in my experience.
Yeah, I've come across a few in my career, and when when you present work and they go, that's, often they're like kind of pull you aside afterwards, go, we kind of like what we saw, but I think there could be something further. And on occasion, what they actually mean is, go backwards, don't be so creative, which is a bit sad. Yeah. But sometimes they actually mean, no, we really want to take it, and you go, okay, fine, let's do that.
Josh got that, when I was working with him at Y&R in a chair role. Those guys were doing it, but he got that with this guy, Fernando, who was part of...
the Burger King.
Yeah, he was the guy from the private
marketing
equity
director of Burger King.
Well, he was the guy that the private equity firm in Brazil, they put him into, because they owned Burger King. They put him in to fix it.
Right.
And he happened to be one of the most awarded marketing guys in the world.
Yeah.
And they didn't know this until, Josh has probably told you the story about how the whole thing happened. But,
this is the McWhopper campaign.
Yeah. But had they, they made a video of the idea. This is after it was rejected by the local PK. They sent it. They tracked down this guy in New York and sent it to him. He took, probably emailed it to him, I guess. He took one look at the video and said something like, "Get on the next plane. I want to hear about this."
Yeah.
But had they not got a guy who was a very creative, very strong marketing guy who understood the power of brands and marketing and ideas, it would never have happened.
Yeah.
Like it never happened.
And it was the persistence that that Josh and the guys had.
Absolutely.
To push it through.
Yeah. No, I don't think I've ever worked with someone as persistent as Josh.
Yeah.
He's a very, very clever guy. And, This
is Josh Moore, people.
Josh Moore, yeah. He would knock down doors and he would just persist until he could knock them down. And, you get offside with some people on doing that, but then you get the really good work through, like McWhopper. And it was stunning work. It was just, and the stuff they did for Jaguar, which I thought was even better than McWhopper, but it was a smaller thing.
With James McKee, who's a client, ex-client.
That's right.
Well.
Yep.
Still fishing with him. Hi, James. Yeah.
Another great client.
Yeah.
And those people are, there's not many of them around, unfortunately. And so a lot of the work you end up doing it can be pretty humdrum because clients, they bring it back and they bring it back and they bring it back, and then the idea disappears. I remember going to see a great creative guy in Saatchi's in Wellington years ago to ask him some advice on who I should hire as a CD. And he was talking about the fact that although on the outside it looked like they were doing fabulous work, which they were, but he said we would work on the principle of if we can get one brief to work out of 10, we'll be happy. We'll be happy that the other 9 will be average. They won't be great, and they won't be bad, but they'll be average. But if we get 1 out of 10, then we're doing pretty well. And I think that holds true now.
Yeah, not a particularly high success rate, but that's the business.
That's the nature of the business. Yeah.
Now, so what? This is the segment I really like, which isn't really a segment but a question. What do you think is the biggest mistake that you've made in your career? The things that you'd look back and you go,
biggest mistake, I would say.
Other than hiring John Ramage.
Yeah, no, we had a good time with John. The biggest, and we're still talking.
Yeah,
we still get together for a drink.
Yeah,
so he's a good guy. The biggest mistake I think I ever made, I never really, 2 mistakes, if I be brutally honest.
John told me to ask this question, by the way.
One was that I didn't school myself up in some business stuff like governance. I didn't understand contracts well enough when I was signing them. You know how somebody puts a bit of paper in front of you and...
Sign this, it's all right, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it, yeah. And it took me, several contracts to understand that I need to understand these better. I need to take the time to actually work out what these are actually saying and understand why lawyers are recommending certain things to me. And I was a bit late in coming to that. So we sold out a couple of times too early. And it wasn't until we did the deal with Y&R that a lawyer sat me down one day and said, look, this thing here, I'll put this into the contract. It may not ever happen, but if it does happen, this will provide protection for you. Sure enough, it happened that way. This one thing that he put in the contract that he didn't think would ever come about, but he said it may happen. And it did come about, and we did get the protection we needed. So I didn't put enough attention into that. I have subsequently. I've had to do that subsequently.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that contracts are normally in the 2 parties. In the case of buying and selling agencies, they're put together and everyone's happy and chummy and it's all good and we're all mates. And then the issue can be that 3-4 years down the track, that the people on the other side who've signed it are not necessarily there, and the people who are there don't view things in quite such a nice way.
Yeah. So you got to take the time to understand these things, and the sooner you start to come to grips with those things, the more attention you pay to that kind of stuff, the better it is for you later on. And then when I got the reverse situation of that happening that was in my favour, it was I think it was the last year at Y&R. And Noel Leeming was our biggest client.
Yeah.
They were spending like $20 million a year with us. And we were getting a retainer of $200,000 a month, maybe $225,000.
You're allowed to say that?
This is 12 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
And they decided, and they'd been bought by a private equity firm in Australia, and they put in new people, a new board and a new chair. I won't name this chair, but he's a guy that I have no respect for whatsoever. This is a guy who's written a book on business. He's got a weekly column in the Herald. Every time I look at that column, I think how bad this guy is, and yet he's deemed to be a very good, chairman. He came to me one day and said, look, we're putting the business up for pitch. I said, well, we're not going to participate because you've already told us you want to cut our fee by a third. And I asked your CEO the question, if you want to cut our fee by a third, which third of our services do you no longer want? And he said, no, we want all of them, but we just want them for less. And I said, look, no, I'm not going to do that. So we're not going to participate in the pitch and we'll resign the business. And so we did that, and Hamish in Australia went apeshit at me, and I said, look, I don't care. I've worked for 4 or 5 years to get this business back into profitability, and it's going really well. And I'm fucked if I'm going to give away that kind of money and drop my trousers that much and go backwards. So part of this is my money and I'm not doing it. So anyway, the chairman then comes to see me one day after they decided on whoever they went with. Might have been FCB, I think. He said to me, he rang me and said, "Could I come and see you?" And I said, "Yep." He said, "I want to talk to you about the contract that you have," because we had an exit clause that said they had to pay us for 6 months to, ease out a contract.
Yeah.
The same figure every month. And so, before he came, I reread the contract just to make sure I understood. I couldn't quite work out where he was coming from. And what I didn't expect him to say was, "Ross, we want to renegotiate the contract." And John was in the room. John will tell you what happened. So this guy's sitting there. He's a big chief around town. And he said, "Yeah, no." I said, "What do you mean you want to renegotiate the contract? We've terminated the contract. It's coming to an end and there's an exit clause." He said, "Yeah, that's the part I don't like." So I said, "You want me to agree to charge you a lower fee while we're still working for you, and it's an earn-out over an exit clause?" He said, "Yes." But I said, "I signed that contract with your company and your company signed it with my company in good faith. And it's in writing. I've checked. Here it is." He said, "Oh, yeah," but I said, "It's too much." So this guy kept on saying, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, what is happening here? And John was kind of wondering what the hell's happening. And I'm thinking, am I missing something here? And I said, "Look, Bruce, don't you understand that I'm a man of my word? And had we not had this in writing and it was a handshake agreement, I would honour my side of the agreement. And we have something in writing here, it's in contract, and I expect you to honour your side of the commitment." So the answer was no. And he got up and he threw his stuff on the bag on this desk and got up and left the room. So he rings me a couple of days later, "Can I come back and see you again?" Calm down, and he came, same thing, 4 times. And it got to the stage where I rang a couple of CEOs of big companies that I knew. I said, "Look, there's something, I might be missing something because it doesn't make sense to me." And so I told them what had gone on and what the contract said. And they said, no, absolutely. You're entitled to get 6 months of revenue from this client. They've chosen to exit the contract. They know that they would have known that before they terminate or before you agree to exit. So no. So they just kept on saying no. And I did. In the end, they had to pay. But had I not kind of learned about contracts and how these things work the hard way, it would have been quite easy for me to say, "Look, okay, well, cut it in half," or I would have been bullied into it.
Yeah.
But I refuse to be bullied.
Hello?
Who's there? I don't know.
That's a strange, to me. I don't know why he came back 4 times. I can only presume that he promised. Maybe there's pressure on him, and he promised to someone up the line, "Oh yeah, don't worry, I'll sort this out."
We figured that out. He would have gone. We figured it out after about the second meeting that he's gone back to his private equity guys in Australia, and he said, "Look, I know this guy because he did know me, and I can talk him around to it." And on the final time, he said to me, when I finally said no, he said, "Ross, I just want you to understand that my private equity guys in Australia, the owners, have asked me to relay to you that this is a small town." And I said to him, "Is that a threat?" He said, No. I said, "Well, it sounds like a threat to me, and it still doesn't change my opinion." And so anyway, the lesson I learned there was that the effort that I put into understanding how these things work put me in a better position when you're faced with those kind of things in business, because those sort of things happen in business a lot. Particularly when you own a business, these things happen a lot more than you'd expect, and you've got to be able to deal with them. And so,
yeah,
I'm rambling on a bit here. Sorry.
Well, I certainly found that story very interesting. I love hearing about the background to deals. So, Ross, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us and sharing some Tales from the past.
That's good. It's a great industry.
And good luck with all your ventures in the future.
Yep, thank you.
You're listening to Truth
and Soul,
the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
Okay, so thank you very much to the usual suspects for putting this together. Jonathan, Vanessa, Cole, Shane and the rest of the crew from Franklin Road. Drop me a line at paul@truthandsoul.co.nz if you have helpful comments, unbounded praise or fishing tips. So please find yourself encouraged. Also a 5-star review on iTunes helps, I believe. I know this may be perjury, but it's for a good cause-ish. Thank you for listening. Here's Matt Stalker to play out for you. Check out Matt Stalker and Fables on Spotify. They're great. Stay safe. Thank you.
On the Farewell Drive, we found 100 ways that our hands fit together. Centrifugal force pulls us apart. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn, thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. Like these that we understand our father's fascination with dendrology. The family tree is losing its leaves. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn, thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and